Jesus Christ. Hello guys, how are you? This is a video I've been having problems with my internet, so I hope it works out. Just have been complicating my life a little. We're moving on to Unit 4, talking about money, banking, and finance. Chapter 1. Let's see, what is money exactly? As we all know, money is a good that is widely accepted for exchange. And money can be anything that acts as a medium of exchange. What is it? It's something that is accepted by all parties as payment for goods and services. So throughout history, we use various materials as a medium of exchange. Colored shells, tobacco, silver, salt, and so on. We also have the measure of value. What is the measure of value? It's a measuring stick to express and centavos. We also have the store of value. It's a part of money that allows time to pass. For example, if I get my salary, I put my salary into a banking account, and I can use it a year later. I still have the same purchasing power. It can be saved until needed. Okay? These are the 3 ways for us to actually talk about the roles of money. I just brought you a picture. Maybe this will help you a little understand it, okay? Exchange. I can exchange an item for another good or service, okay? This is my medium of exchange. Measure of value. Remember, it's a common denominator that can be used to express what is the money worth. We also have the store of value. It gives you purchasing power. I don't have to spend my salary now. I can put it in the bank account and I use it a year later and it will have the same value. So these are the roles of money in our society. Let's go back to history a little, okay? As you all might know, the items used as money have changed. Initially, in each civilization, usually a scarce and desirable item was used as a common object of trade, of course, and everybody would accept it as useful and valuable. What are some desirable and scarce items that they had? Cows, tobacco, stones, whale teeth, precious metals, precious stones, and so on. Eventually, currency has developed as a natural extension, of course, of the use of IOUs and banking. It is said that the future will see the elimination of paper currency and the use of paper stored value, something similar to what we have today as debit cards and credit cards. So, how does money come? What is the format of money? Money needs to be portable, it needs to be durable, it needs to be divisible. I can break it down into cents, available, and transferable. This is how my money comes to me. And what does the money do? Okay, for us to understand what is the function of money exactly, we need to imagine a world without money as we know it today. Okay, so imagine you want to buy food, I want to buy a car, I want to pay my rent, and we don't have money to exchange, right? So I would have to go to a person and I need to trade something that somebody else wanted for each of these items. So imagine, what are the chances if I want to buy a car, right? And I want to go to the car dealer. If I don't have money, I need to trade something that I have, my service, English classes. What are the chances that this car dealer wants English classes in exchange for a car? This difficult situation is also known as a double coincidence of wants. Each party to the trade must want what the person has to offer. So it doesn't take much imagination to realize that no economy could become very sophisticated if it did not move beyond the barter. And what is a barter? Barter, if I have a cow and I exchange my cow for food Or I have a weapon and I exchange my weapon for, I don't know, a bicycle, and so on. So barter is good, but it doesn't really last that long because we have double coincidence of wants. I want to get a car, but the car dealer is not really interested in having English classes. It won't work. But if I have the money, then it will work. And what gives the money its value? What is the dollar really worth? The dollar's value is relatively, it can be expressed in many ways, actually. Imagine you buy a soft drink at a fast food restaurant, a soda, or you can buy a CD for $14 or a t-shirt. Or I can hire somebody to teach me how to dance samba, how to fix my car, how to clean my house for $100. The point is the value of the dollar is whatever the people making the exchange decide it's worth. I want to buy a soft drink, a Coke, at McDonald's for $1. Me and the person selling the soft drink have both decided that $1 has the same value as one soft drink. So if I work 15 minutes to get that dollar, then the soft drink was equal to 15 minutes of my labor. Similarly, the person that's selling the CD or the t-shirt or teaching, cleaning my house or teaching me how to dance, they feel that what they have to offer has a value, and I agree that their product or service is worth the value. So basically, the value of a dollar constantly fluctuates depending on the situation. And here we have, I don't know if you guys all have heard of this, that the value of the dollar, it will always be worth something because the government backs it up with gold. We always have this idea for every dollar, there's gold. That the government holds $1 of gold reserve. And this is wrong, at least nowadays. The dollar is not backed by gold. We like to believe this because it gives us a false comfort. So a dollar is not backed up by gold. So how do we know the value of dollar? A dollar is worth $1 because two people are willing to exchange them for goods and services, just like that. Okay, it is by means of our mutual confidence that money will be generally accepted by others, and that makes us accept it when it's presented to us. So without this confidence, the monetary system would surely fail. If I go to McDonald's and I buy a soft drink that costs $1 because I believe that the soft drink is worth $1, and so does the person selling it to me. This is what gives value to money. Hundreds of years ago, all paper currency was backed by precious metals, all of it, hundreds of years ago. So the system of paper currency got its start actually in the Middle Ages. At that time, what happened? The currency used was gold and silver. So people would carry around gold and silver coins. As you can imagine, they were very valuable and also not so easy to carry around. They were heavy. So people began to do what? They started to use goldsmith to hold their money until they needed it. So if I had silver and gold, I would go to the goldsmith and he would hold my money. Why? Because the goldsmith was better equipped to protect the gold and silver, and they would give me a receipt. So I would give the goldsmith my gold to keep for me, and they would give me the receipt. And when I needed the gold, or when people needed the gold at that time, they would exchange the receipts for their gold. And eventually somebody had the brilliant idea that it's not necessary to go to the goldsmith each time that people needed gold for purchase. Instead, people could simply exchange the receipts instead of the gold issued by the goldsmith. So this was the beginning of our paper currency. Something else that we owe to medieval goldsmith, another useful practice was developed at that time. What is this practice? So the goldsmith people would go and they would leave their gold and silver with them, and they would give the people receipts to use. And they realized that not everyone needed their gold and silver at the same time. So what did they do? The goldsmith, they began to lend part of it out at interest. And this, according to historians, they say this is when banking started. Enterprising goldsmiths have given us banks, loans, and paper currency. It all become here. And this takes us to the evolution of money. Okay, as we have talked, money was a barter. It's a commodity money. Remember, you can trade a cow for food. Okay, and remember, a barter, a commodity money, is a type of money. If you don't trade it for something else, you can use it for you. If it's corn, I can eat it. If it's cow, I can also use it. If it's food, I can use it. Today, in the United States, the money is managed by Federal Reserve System, the Fed. They are privately owned, publicly controlled central bank of the United States. They issue paper currency known as the Federal Reserve Notes. It's the most visible part of our money supply. So why did money replace the barter system? Just like we said, it's much easier. If I want to buy a car, I have money, I can give the car dealer money. The car is worth 30,000 reais. Okay, it's acceptable for both of us. If I don't have money, I'm going to use the barter system. I would need to offer the car dealer a service or another good that I have. And sometimes the car dealer does not really need what I have to offer. Okay? Colonial America. So the money used by early settlers in American colonies was similar to that found in early societies. Commodity money. Okay? Cows, corn, musket balls, they were all served as commodity money. They could be used to settle debts and make purchases. And at the same time, the colonists, they could also consume these products if necessary. I have corn, and for some reason I can't or I don't want to trade it, I can eat it. That's why it's called commodity money. It was accepted as a commodity money, also was accepted tobacco. Okay, tobacco was very used at that time. The governor of Virginia set a value, 3 English shillings per pound in 1618. So 2 years later, actually, the colonists used some of this commodity money to bring wives to the colonies. After this, other colonies established something which is called fiat money. What is fiat money? It's money by government decree. Okay? Where the government says this money is worth this. For example, in 1637, Massachusetts established a monetary value for wampum. What is this? It's a form of currency that the Native Americans made out of white and purple mussel shells. Okay? The Native Americans and the settlers, they used these shells in trade. This is how we have fiat money. White shells were more plentiful, there were more of them than purple ones. So 1 English penny was made equal to 6 white or 3 purple shells. The colonial settlers could even pay their taxes with wampum. Paper currency was another popular form of fiat money here in the colonies. Let me highlight it for you. Some state laws, they actually allowed individuals to print their own paper currency if they promised to redeem the currency for gold or silver. So some states even printed money in the form of tax anticipation notes and used them to pay salaries, buy supplies, or meet other expenditures. They received taxes and they could redeem the notes. The Continental Congress issued paper money to finance the Revolutionary War. Okay, so they printed about 1/4 billion of continental dollars at that time. And what happened? They printed such a large amount of money that by the end of the revolution, it was worthless. The money wasn't worth anything. Let's talk a little bit how we went from tailors to dollars. At that time, we also had Spanish pesos. The Spanish pesos were also known as pieces of eight because they were divided into eight subparts, subparts known as beats. Because the pesos resembled the Austrian thalers, they were nicknamed thalers. And in the German, thalers sounded exactly like the word dollars. So this term became so popular that the dollar became the basic monetary unit or standard unit of currency in the US money system. Sorry. But when they adapted to thalers, rather than dividing the dollar into eight pieces, as the Spanish did in the past, it was decided to divide it into tenths, which was much easier to understand and for people to exchange. But nowadays, we still use some terminology associated with the Spanish peso. Okay, what is one of them? If you have a 20 cents coin, I have 20 cents. In the United States, it's very common to see somebody calling it one quarter of a dollar, which means 2 bits. Comparing commodity money and fiat money. Just for us to understand the difference, okay? Commodity money could be exchanged for goods and services, just like fiat money, okay? Unlike fiat money, it could also be used by the owner. So remember, the difference is commodity money, the owner can use it. If it's a cow, I can use it. If it's corn, I can use it. Fiat money was more easily transportable. It's much easier to transport fiat money than to transport corn or tobacco than commodity money. Okay? But fiat money cannot be used by the owner. So, just to know the characteristics of our modern money today, okay? What are the characteristics? Portability. Modern money is portable. Our currency is lightweight, it's convenient, and it can be easily transferred from one person to another. The same applies to the use of checks or electronic deposits in a bank. Durability. It has to be durable. Metallic coins, they last around 20 years, and if I'm not sure, a $1 bill lasts around 18 months in circulation. So it's durable. Divisibility. The money is divisible. Okay, the penny is the smallest denomination of the coin. It's small enough for almost any purchase. In addition, people can write checks for the exact amount of a purchase. We also need to focus on scarcity. Modern money is in limited supply. This is because the Fed monitors the size of the money supply and takes steps to keep it from growing too fast. What happens if money grows too fast? It loses its value. In what way is our modern money an improvement over money used during the colonial period? Is there any way in which colonial money was superior to our money today? I don't know, one of the answers. I don't know if you guys agree with this. We could say colonial money took many forms, right? From tailors to pesos to commodity money, which would have made trade much more complex. Modern money, on the other hand, takes one form, so trade is simple. The advantage of colonial money is that commodity dollars had instant value. They can be used by the person, okay? They can be eaten or used any other way. Let's go here to the components of modern money. So today the money supply has several different components. Okay, some of them are in the form of Federal Reserve notes, and some are in the form of metallic coins issued by the United States Mint. Other components include demand deposit accounts, DDAs, or funds deposited in a bank that can be accessed by writing a check or using a debit card. Remember, the Fed has two measures of our money supply. We have the M1. It's the narrow, the simpler definition that includes coins, currency, travel checks, DDAs, demand deposit accounts, and checking accounts held at depository institutions. These forms of money all function as a medium of exchange. The M2 is a broader measure, a larger measure that includes M1 with forms of money that serve as a store of value, components as saving deposits, time deposits, and money market funds. Okay? So think about how these different components made our money supply more useful to us. Example, coins have always been useful, but paper currency was an improvement over coins. Why? Because paper currency could be produced in higher denominations and was much more portable, easier to carry. Checking accounts were an improvement over coins and paper currency because checks can be written in any amount and they can be easily mailed, making it easier to transfer the money. Moreover, in addition, if I cancel a check, it serves as a receipt for the transaction. If I lose a check, it can be canceled by a bank. If I lose money, I may never find it. So funds transferred electronically, for example, when a company pays its employees by transferring funds directly into the bank accounts, they are faster and simpler. So as you can see, we went from coins, okay, to paper money, to checks, which were much easier to cancel, and nowadays we have electronic money, okay? If I am working, my company can easily transfer the money into my bank account, which would make it faster, simpler, less expensive, and more convenient for everybody. I'm going to go through chapter 1 really fast because this was only an introduction, because we basically covered everything in chapter 1, okay? The development of the modern banking system. Banking practice in the United States have seen many changes, okay? There was a point in time where banking was virtually unregulated. What happened? There were abuses and even affected the type of money that we use. So during the war, nearly 250 million continental dollars were printed, and by the end of the war, as I've told you before, they were worthless. Then the Constitution made some laws. What was it? The Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting and securities and current coin of the United States. The Congress also had the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and other powers vested by this Constitution. And then we had Article 1, Section 9, which says, no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, or make anything but gold and silver. This was the rule. Because of these clauses, the federal government did not print paper currency until the Civil War. So instead, the printing, the distribution, and the regulation of paper money supply were left to the discretion of privately owned banks and other companies that wanted to build canals and railroads. The new constitution left the printing of paper currency to individual states. So by 1811, the country had about 100 state banks. A state bank receives its operating charter from a state government. So the banks, what did they do? They issued their own currency. They printed their notes at a local printing shop. The banks then put these notes in circulation with the assurance that people could exchange them for gold or silver if they ever lost faith in the bank or its currency. At first, most banks printed only the amount of currency they could reasonably back with gold and silver. Others, however, were not dishonest, and they printed large amounts of paper currency in remote areas, areas that were very far away, and they would make it difficult for people to redeem their currency. So problems with currency. Even when banks were honest, problems with their currency arose. First, imagine each bank issued its own currency in different sizes, colors, and denominations. It was a mess. As a result, hundreds of different kinds of notes could be in circulation in any given city. There was absolutely no control. Second, banks were tempted to issue too many notes because they could print more money whenever they wanted. Third, counterfeiting became a major problem. With so many different types of notes in circulation, some counterfeiters did not even bother to copy the notes issued by existing banks. Instead, these people would make fake notes of money. So by the end of the Civil War, more than 1,600 banks were issuing more than 10,000 different kinds of paper currency. Can you imagine? 10,000? So each bank was supposed to have backing for its note in the form of gold or silver, but most of them didn't have that. And as a result, when people tried to use their notes, the merchants, the sellers, they would often check the latest listing of a good and a bad currency before deciding whether or not to accept the money that was with the person. So politically local bankers they resisted any call for a better system because they were making a lot of money, but it was bad for the public, for the people. To fight the Civil War, the Union and the Confederacy, they needed money, of course. So the Congress tried to borrow money by selling bonds, but they failed to raise as much money as the Union war effort required. The United States actually spent a lot of money on the Civil War. So what happened? The Congress decided to print paper currency for the first time ever. This was the Congress. In 1861, the Congress authorized the printing of 60 million in a new currency that had no gold or silver backing. So remember, there was no gold or silver to back up this money. The Congress simply declared that the notes were legal and they must be accepted as payment. These new notes were soon called greenbacks. Why were they called greenbacks? Because of the green ink on the reverse side of the money, which made them very easy to distinguish from the state notes printed by the banks, which were usually blank on the back. So in 1863, the National Currency Act created a national banking system, which was called the MBS, made up of national banks. What is a national bank? It's a privately owned bank. Remember, National Bank is a privately owned bank that receives its operating charter from the federal government. So these banks issued their own notes, which were called national currency or national bank notes, which were backed with bonds that the banks bought from the federal government. The government actually hoped that rigorous bank inspections and other high standards would give people confidence in the new banking system. The new system also would help the union cause because banks that joined the MBS had to buy the union bonds. Initially, only a few state-chartered banks joined the system because for the bank it was much easier to print their own money at a local printer. Why would they join the federal banks? Finally, in 1865, the federal government forced state banks to become part of the national banking system, which is the MBS. How did they force them? They placed a 10% tax on all privately issued banknotes. Because the state-chartered banks could not afford the tax, they took back their notes from circulation, leaving only the greenbacks and currency issued by the NBS in circulation. With this, the need to finance the Civil War changed paper money from issued by state banks to issued backed by the federal government. So this is when the federal government started having control over the money. Okay? The national banking system. So as the war dragged on, people feared that the greenbacks, like the continental dollars used almost a century earlier to finance the Revolutionary War, might become worthless. So the people did not really trust the greenbacks. And when the greenbacks did lose some of their value, people avoided using them. And they forced the Congress to find another way to pay for the war. The 10% tax greatly simplified the money supply as the bank. So as we said, until to the 10% that was put, it kind of forced the state banks, okay, to start using the federal money. And before law, new types of federal currency appeared. Okay, we did not have just what we saw here. Remember? The greenbacks. We started having more. In the same year the MBS was created, the government also issued the gold certificate. What is it? It's a paper currency backed by gold placed on deposit with the United States Treasury. In the beginning, these certificates were printed in large denominations because they were only used by banks. But by 1882, they were also available in smaller denominations to the general public. In 1878, The government introduced silver certificates. They are paper currency backed by silver, placed on reserve with the treasury. This increased the demand for silver, which was very good for the silver miners. The government was already circulating silver dollar coins, but they were too big to be convenient, and the public was happy to have an alternative. Let's see here. Going on gold standard. So remember, when the federal government started issuing money, printing money, they did not have gold or silver to back it up, okay? The Gold Standard Act of 1900, it defined a dollar as equivalent as to what? $1 is worth 20.65 ounce of gold. So people continued to use greenbacks, the gold certificates and the silver certificates, national bank notes, and other federal currencies that specified the number of dollars they represented. By this time, they could exchange these notes for gold at the treasury whenever they wanted. So people can use what? Greenbacks, gold certificates, silver certificates, national bank notes, okay, to exchange them for gold at the treasury whenever they wanted. But the people liked the convenience of paper currency and they usually did not demand gold. So the government could hold much less gold than the currency represented. This was generally true when countries go on gold standard. What is the advantage of a gold standard when a country goes on gold standard? A gold standard has two major advantages. First, people may feel more secure about their currency. Why? Because each dollar has gold to back it up. Second, the standard is supposed to prevent the government from creating too much money because gold is a limited resource, it's scarce. And if paper currency is relatively scarce, it should keep its value. Okay. Since it is rare that all the country's paper notes would be redeemed at the same time, the United States never really held a gold reserve equal to the value of its notes. So they did not really worry about that. Disadvantages of a gold standard. A growing economy needs its money supply to grow as well. And so, under a gold standard, increasing its stocks of gold, if gold is scarce, the growth of the money supply may slow and perhaps stop, limiting economic growth. This is one major disadvantage of the gold standard. Another risk is that a large number of people might suddenly decide, I want to convert my currency at the same time and I want gold. And therefore, they can drain the gold reserves the government have if everybody decides to go and exchange their dollars for gold. This was a risk. Abandoning the gold standard. So during the Depression years, many banks failed, and almost 1 person in 4 people did not have a job. I think you guys remember we talked about this. Because people were so uncertain and insecure, they began redeeming their paper currency for gold. They would go and they would exchange the paper currency for gold because, of course, gold never loses its value. Foreign governments with large dollar holdings, they did the same. And the gold stock held by the US government rapidly shrank. In 1933, President Roosevelt, he issued a series of orders that effectively denied the gold standard to the American people. Executive orders required all citizens to surrender their gold coins to the Federal Reserve System at the rate of 1 ounce of gold for $20.67 of Federal Reserve notes. And the next step was to raise the price of gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. So by 1935, US citizens could no longer redeem dollars for gold. They could not exchange it anymore. But foreign governments were allowed to do so at a higher price. Each ounce of gold now was $35. After World War II, some European countries wanted to build their gold stocks, so they started to redeem their dollar holdings for gold, again, severely draining US reserves. So the official price was $35 for 1 ounce of gold, lasted until August 15, 1971. Then President Nixon took the final step and he declared that the United States would no longer redeem any dollar for gold. Ever since, the price of gold has fluctuated with changes in supply and demand. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of the gold standard? Guys, remember, United States started as a gold standard. It's not anymore. The advantage, people feel more secure. Okay, for every dollar I have, there is gold for it. So the government is prevented from creating too much money as well, and there is no way I can lose value. What is the disadvantage in a gold standard? Because money must be backed by gold, a limited supply of gold can slow the growth of the economy. Also, if many people decide to convert currency to gold at the same time, the government can be drained of gold reserves. So these are for you to understand the advantages and advantages of a gold standard. Okay? So how did the national banking system, how did the Fed strengthen the national banking system? The national banking system also needed to evolve during the golden standard years. Despite a huge number of banks, the system was having difficulty circulating enough currency for the growing nation. So checking accounts were becoming very popular, but many banks had trouble adapting to the challenge, and even more recessions were causing them major problems. Reform came in 1913 when Congress created the Federal Reserve System. Nowadays, it's called the Fed as the nation's central bank. A central bank is a banker's bank, which can lend to other banks in times of need. The Fed was set up in some ways like a corporation. Any bank that joined had to purchase shares of stock in the system. So all national banks were required to do so. And state chartered banks were eligible to buy shares as well. As shareholders or part owners, banks own the Federal Reserve System, not the federal government. The Fed's own currency, called Federal Reserve notes, eventually replaced all other types of federal currency. Because the Fed had the resource to lend other banks during periods of difficulty, it became, the nation's first true central bank. So the establishment of the Fed aimed to solve several problems in the nation's banking system. Okay, let's do it together. A problem. There were many national banks and no centralized system for keeping them strong. What is the solution? The Fed served as a central bank, which strengthened the nation's banking system. Second problem, banks were vulnerable to failure because of lack of reserves. What happened? The Fed had the ability to loan money to banks that were in trouble. Another problem, the nation was operating with several different forms of national currency. How did they solve the problem? The Federal Reserve notes replaced all the other types of federal currency. Banking in the Great Depression. So despite the creation of the Fed, many banks were only marginally sound during the 1920s. They were barely surviving, actually. One reason that the number of banks had soared between the Civil War and 1921. And when the total exceeded 31,000, although some consolidation occurred over the next decade, there were still too many small struggling banks at the start of the Great Depression in 1929. By 1934, more than 10,000 banks had closed or merged with stronger banks. Remember when they create one bank. So if account holders became worried about their bank, they would rush to withdraw money before it failed. By doing this, they created what we call nowadays a bank run. Okay? It's caused when many people go and they withdraw their money from the banks, causing many banks to fail. On March 5, 1933, President Roosevelt announced a bank holiday. It was a brief period during which every bank in the country was required to close. Several days later, after Congress passed legislation to strengthen the banking industry, most banks were allowed to reopen. When the banks failed during the Great Depression, depositors lost most or even all their savings. Because deposits were not insured, there was no insurance for the money. So the Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, which insures customer deposits in case of a bank failure. So at first, the FDIC insured customer deposits to a maximum of 2,500. But today the limit is 150,000 per customer per bank. So if an account holds more than this amount, the depositor may go to court and sue the bank owner to recover the rest. After the FDIC was created, people worried less about the safety of their deposits because they had an insurance, which reduced the number of bank runs. Remember bank runs when people withdraw their money? So if a bank was in danger of collapse, the FDIC could do one of the following. What can they do? They could seize the bank, they could sell a bank to a stronger one, or they can liquidate it and pay off the depositors. If the bank was sold, the sale was done in secrecy to prevent panic and to keep shareholders from selling worthless stock to unsuspecting investors. Federal Reserve notes. They were first introduced in 1914, and they have become the most visible component of our money supply. All of the other federal currencies, national banknotes, silver certificates, gold certificates, and even the US notes, or as we call them, greenbacks, have slowly retired, and they were replaced by the Federal Reserve notes. During the early gold standard years, every dollar of Federal Reserve notes was backed by 0.25 gold reserves. As the note issue grew, and as the government was having difficulty in keeping enough gold to back the notes, the 25% reserve was reduced and it was eventually removed. So nowadays, the dollar is not backed by gold or silver. Okay? Today, in part thanks to the Fed, we have a uniform currency and a more efficient payment system, as well as a sound central bank, safe central bank. One concern is the fact that some banks have become so large that they cannot be allowed to fail, a problem the Fed was not designed to manage. So what is exactly the purpose of the FDIC? They have to insure customer deposits in case of bank failure. If Bradesco fails and my money is there, the FDIC, they need to ensure that I have my money back. Guys, this is for you. I think this would help you a little bit on your lesson. It's the first lesson actually that you have in Unit 4. You have to, can I say? You need to explain the advantage and the disadvantage of being on the gold standard, actually the country. Okay, remember, a gold standard is when every dollar is backed by an amount of gold. Okay, that's what we call the gold standard. Okay, what is good? What is bad about the gold standard? And do you think we should return to the gold standard nowadays? Yes, I think we should return to the gold standard because or no, I don't think we should return to the gold standard. Okay? Identify 3 publicly traded companies that provide services or product that you haven't used in the last year or so. Identify 3 publicly traded companies that provide services or products that you have used in the last years. Let me make this bigger for you guys to see because I copied this. Research and share with me the most recent stock price and any dividend that they have been paid in the last year. Are any of these companies you would consider investing in if you had the funds to invest? Why or why not? So you have 2 questions here. First, explain the advantages and disadvantages of being on the gold standard. And if you think we should return to using the gold standard. When we say we are talking about the American government. Then you have to identify 3 publicly traded companies that provide services or products that you have used in the last years or so. Research and share the most recent stock price and any dividend that these companies have been paid in the last year. Okay? Are any of these companies you would consider investing in? So if you had funds after you investigate these companies, would you invest your money in any of them? Yes or no? And then you have to explain why. Okay? this is basically it. I will send you the video soon. Okay. And then we'll get on Zoom to discuss any questions you guys might have. I strongly suggest that you read chapter 1 and 2. Okay. I don't really have time to go through every single detail, and watch the videos that are available for you guys. I think they're really, really useful. Okay. I'll see you around 4 o'clock, I think. Bye. No, 4 o'clock. No, Jesus Christ. No. I will see you around 3:30. Yeah, 3:30.